and welcome to a brand new episode of Talking Law from Women in the Law UK. I'm Sally Penni, a barrister based in Manchester at Kenworthy's Chambers and the Joint Vice Chair of the Association of Women Barristers. I'm also the founder of Women in the Law UK, an organisation which is passionate about supporting the next leaders in law. Find out more at womeninthelawuk.com. You could also connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Find us on Facebook. Just search for Women in the Law UK. Find us on Instagram at Women in the Law UK. On this episode, I'll be talking law to Mary Pryor QC. An eminent silk at 36 Bedford Row, Mary practices exclusively in serious and complex criminal offences. As you'll hear, Mary comes from a northern working class background and had an unusual journey to the bar via sponsored pupillage with the CPS. She now also sits as a recorder and is involved in numerous organisations, including Women in Criminal Law. She shares some superb advice for a successful career in law.
Well, I'm not sure I did choose the law, Sally. I think the law may have chosen me, because when I was at school, it never occurred to me that someone like me could be a lawyer. And I left school at 17 because I was being bullied in my A-level year. And I moved from my home to live with my sister in Essex. And because we didn't have very much money as a family, I wanted to try and finish my A-levels in the 2-year period that I had set aside to do them. Yeah. And so I looked for 3 A-levels that I could do in a year. Now, I'd already done a year of French, so that was fine. And I've done a year of English, so that was also fine. And the only real options for a year course was law. So I did it for that reason. And I did the A-level. And as I was doing it, thought, well, I quite like this. And my A-level tutors suggested I thought about carrying on in further education. And so I chose law because it was an interesting subject, not actually because I thought that I would be doing law for a career, but I thought it would be a good degree to have.
Did you know anybody in the law?
No. I can trace my family roots, sadly and delightfully at the same time, back to about 1730. And I can assure you that there is nothing in my family history on either side of any real excitement, but it is generation after generation of coal miner, marrying a coal miner's daughter, producing more coal miners and coal miners' daughters who married on and on. So when I look at it, I can just see coal miner, coal miner, coal miner. I suppose the most professional people I knew were teachers.
Yes.
All my family were coal miners. My father was a coal miner. My mum worked in a factory. My mum was one of 9, and all the men were coal miners, and all the women had jobs. And everyone who lived around us, because we lived in a national coal board house, were also coal miners. So, if I'd been going into the coal industry, I'd have been so well placed. I'd have had such connections. But no, nobody.
So, when you came to the bar then, just tell me, I know I asked you about all these questions in my book, Talking Law, but I really want you to share with us really your journey to where you are now, because you also went via the CPS, didn't you? And you were a court clerk, and, people forget the importance of these other extra jobs that we do along the way, which of course, from an intellectual point of view, sets you up nicely for the bar. So I wonder if you could just take us from there. Did you go to bar school, decided to become the bar, not a solicitor? Was that the first decision?
No, it wasn't actually. I finished my degree, and then there was a book at the time that you could look in to find a graduate job, because I wasn't going to be a lawyer. And I wrote to everybody in that book who would take my degree as a starting point, a passport in. I got a job working for a company who sold Volvos. I don't know why they took me on. I was hopeless, truly hopeless at that job. But they did, and I worked there for a year. And I worked out I was hopeless pretty early on. So I started looking for other jobs and saw a job as a magistrate's court clerk, which at that stage you just needed your law degree for. And I got a job at Essex Magistrates Courts Committee. I worked there for 6 years. It's a tremendous job for anyone who's looking at what to do with a law degree. I learned a huge amount by watching advocates and seeing what worked and what didn't. And I got to work with magistrates to understand the sorts of reasons that they have for making decisions. And after 6 years, the court service wanted me to qualify, so they paid for me to qualify. And the reason I ended up on the bar course was because the solicitor's course was full. Even at that stage, I wasn't considering being a barrister. I was determined that I was going to go back and carry on being a court clerk. I'd have just got more salary because I'd have been a senior court clerk at that stage. So it was only really when I got onto the bar course and I realised actually that I was just as bright as the other people who were on that course and able to do the job, which came as a bit of a shock. And then I thought, well, I can't go to the bar because at that stage you didn't get paid to do pupillage. You had to fund yourself, which just simply wouldn't have been an option for me. And I saw a scheme with the Crown Prosecution Service, which did sponsored pupillage. Now, my geographical history was the Northeast. And then when that pit closed, the Midlands, Stoke-on-Trent. I then lived for a year with my sister. And then I lived in Essex while I was doing my degree. And I found myself moving to Devon and Cornwall to join the Crown Prosecution Service as a trainee, which was, again, fabulous. And I was there for 6 years. So I did my pupillage there. And then I worked as a Crown Prosecutor and then a senior Crown Prosecutor with Devon and Cornwall. Utterly fabulous work and such good training and such a lot of advocacy that was above and beyond what you might ordinarily expect. So wonderful to be part of a team and learning a load of new skills. By that stage, I had 3 children, a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a baby. And CPS at that time were not paying all that well. And my husband didn't, but my husband at the time didn't work. So it was a struggle financially. And I had to make a decision whether I'd carry on there or whether I wanted to take one opportunity in life to see if I could progress. And they were offering early redundancy because they had too many staff at that time. So I took early redundancy and with a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old and a baby, decided I'll try out for the independent bar. As you do. Now I look at it and I think, goodness me, what were you thinking? But
at the time,
I just thought, well, I'm probably not going to get another chance because it would be the only sort of lump sum that I'd ever have to support me through that period. And I was really naive, actually, because I thought, well, I've done 6 years as a Crown Prosecutor and I've done 6 years as a court clerk. So people are going to be really impressed with these skill sets and give me a chance. How wrong can anyone be? So I applied all over the place and got lots of rejections. In that stage, they were written rejections. And I made a papier-mâché bird with them, which eventually turned into a rather fat turkey, actually. But I did get an interview with a very small chambers in Wolverhampton called Clock Chambers. And Professor John Ritson, who works at Wolverhampton University, is the head of that set, who is one of the most kind and decent people you'll ever meet. And he and the clerk there, Henry Soulsby, decided to give me a chance. So I took that chance and I went there and I was prosecuting and defending in the Magistrates Court. And I got to know people and then they gave me the chance to prosecute and defend in the Crown Court. And the rest is really history. Eventually, I was taken to one side by someone who I was against on a regular basis and asked if I'd like to join the 36 Bedford Row, to which I said, yeah, that sounds nice. Yeah, I could do that. And so I did. But all I think anyone in life needs is just one chance and just someone to have a bit of faith in you, especially when you come from a non-direct route into the profession. And so I have always and will always remain grateful to Henry Soulsby and to Professor Ritson for giving me that chance. And I still keep in touch with Professor Ritson. Very sadly, Henry died, but I still keep in touch with him and with that set because it enabled me and lots of other practitioners to start in this profession and have a chance.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mary, how then did you become, or did you come to apply for Silk and then become a recorder, which is a part-time judge? Because your story and you are so inspirational. Did you have any mentors, or I mean, who inspired you? How did they come about for you to go from senior, junior to become QC?
Michelle Simpson, really. She is one of a very few female practice managers in barristers' chambers. She's an incredible woman and doesn't take no for an answer. So she had seen my practice and asked me why I hadn't applied for Silk, and I explained to her that people like me don't apply for Silk, obviously. And she looked at me aghast and said, "Of course you should, and of course you will, and I'll help you through the process." I managed to put it off for a couple of years because I really didn't think that it was a thing for me. I was very worried about the change in income and having to
Yeah.
start finding work from nowhere again, because I did very senior junior work and I was really busy and really successful, for which I'll always be grateful to those who've instructed me. But taking the next step up does involve a risk. It involves a worry whether you actually get work. There are some silks who don't get very much. And basically, she just kept on at me until in the end, after a very large glass of wine, I said, "I promise you I'll do it next year." And I don't break a promise. So I did. So I applied, and I had an interview and I got it. And as a result of that, I felt so privileged. I mean, I've always felt really privileged to be a barrister, but I just felt so privileged. And she suggested to me that I sat, and I've learned to take her advice. And so I did the same thing. I applied and I got it. And I can't tell you the pride I feel in both of those things. Well, all three, actually: going to the bar, being a
Yes.
silk, and sitting as a recorder. I sometimes just sit quietly and realize how far I've come, but
Mm.
how supported and inspired I've been along the way. That's been really important, particularly as a woman,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come to that because there are many women QCs. There are many black or minority QCs, and I just wondered, what do you think about diversity in our profession? Um, because I'm trying to showcase leaders in law from the perceptions about our profession, and the backgrounds required to come to do a privileged job representing people or giving a voice to those who have been victims of crime or otherwise, and the different disciplines we all practice in. So I just wondered, what do you think about diversity, and how can we improve on race and social mobility and, of course, gender?
Well, I think we can only do so much as a profession because the difficulties start much earlier in life. But I think what I would say is that the JAC process, so the Queen's Counsel application process,
Yes.
I think is first class in avoiding discrimination and encouraging social mobility, because they don't ask you which university you went to.
Mm.
They don't ask you to provide general referees. They don't ask you where you grew up or what school you went to. So all those conscious, unconscious biases that may have held people back in the past do not hold you back when you're applying for Silk. I
Yes.
was absolutely certain when I completed that competition, whatever the outcome, that I had been judged entirely on who I am and what I was able to offer inside a courtroom. And the same, I think, applied to the recorder's exam. It was really hard, particularly for me, because I don't do a lot of I don't have a civil practice, so it was quite difficult to do lots of written work in short periods of time.
Yes.
In subjects I didn't really know. It took me right back to university, and that was a long time ago that I did any of that. But again, the questioning process and the way it worked, I am entirely satisfied, had all of those biases eradicated, and I was judged entirely and utterly fairly on who and what I am. I think the institutions, so from university upwards, are trying their best to achieve that end, but the problem starts much earlier in life, and it's difficult really to progress, because unless you know what it's like to be spoken down to, or to have people judge you simply because of the way you speak, your colour, your religion, or what you wear, I think it's almost impossible for someone from the outside to understand that.
Yes.
So I remember people speaking down to my father and feeling this enormous sense of grievance. And they spoke down to him because he had a Geordie accent, and because at that time he was disabled. And they wanted him to claim benefits, and he wanted to work, even though he'd earn less money, because for him it was a matter of pride.
Yes.
And these people just couldn't get it, wouldn't get it. And I found that extremely frustrating. I think the major problem when you are progressing is what you don't know, you don't know. It sort of makes you stand out so clearly, as against other people, that I think it's difficult to have a fair system without you having the same basic right of a good education. I
Mm.
suppose the biggest difference is probably confidence.
Yeah.
People who've had a very privileged education are much more confident. They've had a much smaller class to deal with and to be studying in. They've had their opinions encouraged. They've had debate encouraged, whereas that's not ordinarily the case. It happens in some schools, but it doesn't always happen in other schools. But if you grow up in a house without books, without discussion, where you're hungry, where you have to work to get through school and university, I always say it's a bit like running a marathon, and you all start the marathon at the same time, but those who've had those difficulties have already run somewhere between 6 and 10 miles before they start. If they reach the end at the same time, to me, those people are absolute heroes. I don't dismiss or diminish the achievements of those who have not had difficulties in their life, but for those who have, they've had to work a lot harder to achieve the same end result. I think our profession is so much richer and warmer and better for having people who reflect society as a whole within it. And I think the main thing that we can do is precisely the stuff you do, Sally. You have a young family, you have a busy practice, and yet you're constant in your desire and ability to inspire others by your podcasts, by the work you do, by all the extracurricular things you do, and by your warmth and generosity of spirit. And for me, that's a hero or a heroine. um, and if we can all, those of us who want to, walk alongside each other to make sure that we might just inspire that one light who'll inspire the next generation. I mean, I hope that doesn't sound overly gushy, but I genuinely believe that if we walk alongside each other and respect and admire each other and make a difference, that's probably worth far more than books and educational policies. You just want someone to feel that they have someone on their side. I think that's what we can do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I don't get many compliments, but I love that one. Thank you,
Well, you
Mary.
should. You should.
Thank you so much. I think I've lost my train of questions now. Um, well, can I ask you then, what would be your 3 tips and guidance perhaps then for those entering the law? Because I've often said in keynote speeches, the law is like a marathon, it's not a sprint. And it's very difficult for young people entering now. There are less pupillage places, particularly for the bar, and less training contracts for our colleagues in the solicitor's profession. I just wondered if you've got, three tips or guidance for those entering the law, because I noted, I think it was earlier this year or last year, and you did a 10 points for aspiring entrants to the legal profession on LinkedIn, where you'd commented on ways that would be helpful. So I wonder if you could just give us three of those, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, of course. Number one, be yourself. Just be you. There is no one better. You will have a unique skill set which will enable you to make the very best barrister or solicitor that there is. So many students try very hard to pretend to be someone else, and it's never real, and it doesn't feel real, and it feels very awkward. And I think part of that process is not really having the confidence to understand what you're good at and what you're not good at,
Mm.
but loving yourself anyway. So just be yourself. That's the first thing. The second thing is no one owes you anything in this profession or in life generally.
Yeah.
So if you want it, you are going to have to go and get it yourself by doing things yourself in order to stand out. So instead of saying, can you tell me what there is available for me to do this? Look it up. Go to talks, join in webinars, join in questions, read everything that you can read. Most of these things don't cost a penny, but people don't do them because they sit and take in life. And those who succeed get up and do something. So instead of saying, what can you do for me? Say, what can I do for myself? I think that's the second point. And the third point is don't listen to rubbish. So I've had so many students who've talked to me about reasons they got put off a career in law. And there are some barristers and solicitors who say the most unhelpful things, and I'm never quite sure why. I
Yes,
have,
I wonder that. Mm.
and they'll say things like, you won't be able to succeed because you have an accent. Well, folks, I have an accent, so that's not really an issue. Um, you won't succeed because you haven't got a first. I don't have a first, just so you know. You won't succeed because your public speaking isn't good enough. Well, learn it. Just don't let anyone define you. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do.
Mm.
You will know that along the way in any profession, there are people who try and put you off. You just have to know that you want it and consider everything you're said carefully. But it doesn't mean that anything that is said to you is right. Sometimes people get it wrong, and they can get it horribly wrong. And I interviewed last year a student who got a tremendous scholarship, who had been told not to go to the bar for one of those reasons. So don't take any notice of your doubters. You just forge ahead.
Gosh, I think we need to have a special episode of more. Careers advised by Mary Pryor QC.
And Sally Penni.
Well, Mary, you complimented me kindly about the work I've been doing
Yes.
outside of the courtroom. But, let's not forget the work you've been doing yourself, interviewing for scholarships at Gray's Inn. I thought you were a bencher, actually, but you corrected me and said you're not.
No.
You ought to be. Giving up that free time to do that. You're also involved on the Midland Circuit Women's Forum and, of course, Women in Criminal Law and a whole host of other. You host webinars where students can ask questions on CVs and all sorts. And I just wonder, all of those are fantastic and brilliant. So what do you do for well-being? When do you have time outside of all of those activities and more, which I haven't listed? And what do you do for well-being?
Well, I have a dog.
Ah,
and my dog has to be walked. And she doesn't care what I have to do each day. In fact, it couldn't be of less relevance to her life. So I have to walk her. And in the process of walking her, I walk her through the Amber Valley in Derbyshire, where I live. And you get to see the trees, and it doesn't matter what the weather's like, she wants a walk. So I get fresh air and exercise twice a day. That's really important, I think, to get
mm,
outside of the house and do something.
yes.
Secondly, I live in an area where no one knows me. So no one thinks I'm remotely important. I'm just the woman with the ponytail walking the batty dog. And as far as my neighbours are concerned, I'm just someone who seems to work ridiculous hours and then come home and walk the dog. And I can walk round the village and the town near where I live anonymously. And I think that's important to make sure that you don't get raveled up in your own importance and
Yes.
think you're something special. I also have 5 sons and a husband
Wow.
and a large family. And I spend a lot of time when I can talking to them, playing rounders and football and all the things that you do with a family. And that I think is what keeps me sane. And I'm a football fan. So
Oh,
I'm a
no, we're going to fall out here now.
well, do you know, I might convince you, Sally, that Darlington Football Club are the best football club in the world. And if I can't, I can persuade you that because I live a long way from there now, that Leicester City are the best football club in the world. And I love going to football because you're completely anonymous and you get wrapped up in the game. And I'll be honest, sometimes I shout.
Oh, no.
Yeah, sometimes I shout and perhaps say something that I might not say in a different forum. But I go with my sons and my husband, and we just adore going to football. And I like going to cafes and pubs beforehand, and we meet the opposition's fans and have a chat. Football fans always have something in common. Often, often far more in common than divides us. So
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
enjoy football, and that's really all I do have time for. But what I make sure I do is have a diary, and I keep the things that have to be done, and then everything else takes its own time.
Yes. Well, that's great advice. I mentioned the Midland Circuit Women Forum and the Women in Criminal Law, which you've been very passionate about. I just wondered why you got involved in some of those outside activities as well. And really, and what advice you've got for women about the guilt. We often have the guilt when we're at work, we're guilty about not being there at pickups all the time. And then when we're at home, we're then feeling guilty about the skeleton arguments that we're not doing in that moment that we've got to do
Yeah.
later.
Women have more guilt than you could carry in a large sack, it seems to me, on a daily basis. And what makes it worse is those women that you see on a social media profile who look like a goddess. They've got 2 or 3 perfectly turned out children. They go jogging twice a day. Their careers are amazing. Everything's amazing. And I just look at them and go, I don't think you're real. I
Mm,
just don't think you're real, because you can't have it all and be amazing all the time at everything. Life just isn't like that. It's hard work.
yes.
Um, I'm in the fortunate position that my children are a little bit older now. So my youngest is 17. And you will understand that with 5 children, spread over a period of 10 years. So my eldest is 27, youngest is 17. There have been a number of things I've missed because I've not been able to get away from court to do them.
Yeah.
And there have been a number of times when I've had to say at a certain time in the evening, I'm sorry, I can't do that anymore. I have to go and do some work. And you do feel guilt. Of course you do. But almost like, the Dickens ghost of Christmas past and ghost of Christmas future thing. Recently, for reasons I don't really know, because it could have been awful, I sat down and asked them what the worst things I'd done were, because I was explaining that really I think I should have spent more time with them when they were younger. And they told me straightforwardly that they weren't worried about the quantity of the time that they had, because when they had me, we always had a lot of fun and we did a lot of good things together. Whereas other people's mums just seem to be cleaning the house all the time. I can assure you that's not what my role seems to be in life. I don't want on my gravestone, gosh, she kept a clean house. It's not really it's not really high on my list of priorities. Anyway, they were not concerned about the fact that I wasn't always there for things, but they were really annoyed at me for two things in particular. One was a set of matching cardigans that I bought them all. They were nice cardigans. They were from John
Yes,
Lewis,
yes,
but they were horrified and embarrassed that they had to wear these horrifically non-cool items. So that's number one. And number two is that if they have a birthday party, they've always had to invite all their class,
yes. Here, here.
even the ones they don't like.
Yes, here, here. I do that.
Yeah, and that has not gone down well over the years. But those are the things that children remember particularly. And I think the thing to do is to be in the present. So if you're at work, you're at work. You can't be anywhere else and do anything
Yeah.
else. But when you get home before you start work again and it's children time, just turn your phone off, don't look at your emails, and spend that time with the things that really matter in life, the people who really matter in life, the reason why you get up and go to work, and enjoy the time you have with them, even if it's just 2 hours a day. 2 hours of time where you are looking into your children's eyes, talking to them and being with them is worth far more than 12 hours when you've got your back to them with a duster or
Yes.
hoovering the floor or whatever. So just understand you do the best you can. I think my boys would say I've been a good role model because I've shown them what you can do with perseverance and determination. I
Yeah.
think actually I've done the best I can, and I can live with that.
Well said. Well said. I want to ask you now, please, if I might, a light-hearted question
Okay.
about fictional legal characters. Now, I know if you're like me, you don't watch anything legal because you end up shouting at the damn television about all the inaccuracies and all the corrections that are required. But I just wondered if you could share with us if you had a favorite fictional lawyer, who it would be and why, and also a favorite book or books which may perhaps have had an impact on you.
Okay. My favourite television lawyer is Rumpole. I love Rumpole. He's fat and not too glamorous, and uh, spends most of his time looking down his nose at people who he thinks are posher than him, and trying very hard to stick up for the little man. And at the same time, he clearly is quite posh in his own way, and he's drinking wine in the wine bar and goes home and has his little dinners in his flat and so with his wife and so on. But I particularly like him because he's flawed. And I think all really good lawyers have flaws in their character. And I loved his sense of humour and the fact I thought of all the shows I've seen, it's the most real. I wouldn't say it's real, but it's the
Mm.
most real, obviously written by John Mortimer.
Yes.
And it just used to make me howl because you could sort of see other advocates in that programme who you've come across, and you could sort of see other clerks and, I can't say anything about judges, obviously, but
No, no, no.
obviously some
Certainly
judges.
not.
No,
Certainly not.
no.
Yeah.
So that's my favourite book. My favourite book has always been To Kill a Mockingbird. Always been. It's such a cleverly written book which deals from the eyes of an 8-year-old girl with racism
Yeah.
and institutionalized racism and impoverished white people, non-impoverished white people, fairness and unfairness of trial processes, bereavement, grief, anything and everything. But I loved Atticus Finch in that book because, like all of us, he was obliged to represent someone who he might have chosen not to. Like all of us, he had threats and problems because he was representing someone who people may not have approved of, having formed inaccurate judgments about. and he was independent and fearless, and did it very beautifully and quietly. And I'd love to be independent and fearless and
Yeah.
to just do my job. And he has that wonderful speech to the jury where he says, "Our courts have their faults, as does any human institution, but in this country, our courts are the great levelers, and in our courts, all men are created equal." And you hope, don't you, that that will always be the case.
Yes.
And I just love that little aspect of the book where he's made his closing speech and the public galleries stand as he leaves court. And it's just this firm belief that that's what I'd like to be. I'd like to be an Atticus Finch, principled, dignified, independent, fearless.
Oh, I love that. I think me too. It is one of my. We need to reread it again in our Women in the Law book club. I think that will be really great.
Yeah,
Mary, we're coming towards it. We could talk all day, couldn't we? But coming towards the end of this interview, and I'm recording this in COVID-19. We're all in lockdown. There's a
yeah.
glimmer of hope that we might come out. I just wonder what your views are about our working practices for us at the bar and in the legal profession. Is it going to be possible to do trials by link? I know they're trialing them at the Old Bailey and in Minchell Street as we speak, which is a court nearest to me. What do you think about the impact then of COVID-19 on the bar, on the legal profession, and I suppose on access to justice?
Well, let's start with the positives because there have been some positives for us practitioners.
Yes.
So, for example, I can now make a far better use of a day rather than travelling for 4 or 5 hours to spend 10 minutes in a courtroom dealing with a mention. Those mentions can now be dealt with by telephone or by Skype or some other visually aided mechanism. And that must be the way forward to ensure that all of us have a better work-life balance. If there's a hearing that doesn't actually require the presence of a defendant, which is just for administrative or legal matters, we really should try wherever we can to deal with those hearings by link. I think also if it is a short hearing, then arrangements ought to be made for people who live a long way away to attend by link, unless there's some specific requirement for them to go, because that would encourage, I think, and help those of us who have families and commitments, caring responsibilities, for example, or disabilities, to have a greater access to a wider range of work. Because a lot of women, for example, work close to their homes because it's easier for childcare. It might give us more opportunities. So I think those things are positives. I also think, as a positive, we've learnt to be a lot more communicative in relation to cases and to strive with both sides and the judge to try and make sure that we limit what in fact are the real issues in the case, so that that level of assistance and communication with the judge taking part in a discussion, I found quite helpful actually. So it means that when we do start trials again, we'll be in a better place to deal with them. I don't rule out any type of changes in the legal system because we must develop with the times in which we live and we must develop with the circumstances in which we live. It's really important, of course, that whoever is organising this, and I know huge amounts of work are being done, that we ensure that we can sit down with a vulnerable person, whether it's a victim or witness of crime or someone who's accused of a crime or one of their witnesses. We can sit down face to face with people to reassure them, in particular with vulnerable defendants, to gain their trust and ensure that we're in a position to make sure that we can put their case forward as fairly as possible. So that needs to be done. I don't know how I would feel about doing a trial without being able to see a witness and without being able to see a jury in the full sense of the word. But
Yes.
I've never done it.
Mm.
So I've learned over the years that the reason our profession and our legal system is so revered is because we do adapt and we do change. And I'm going to look at it with an open mind, because until I've experienced it for myself, I don't feel that I could say that it's a good thing or a bad thing. I know that we've done it in a particular way for a very long time, but whether that's going to always remain the case, I don't know. More and more things are being done virtually and
Yes.
visually.
Yeah.
Um, I think we should just all keep a really open mind, because you know, and I know, Sally, the most amazing thing about this job is that we're learning something new every day.
Yeah.
We're learning new technology. If not for COVID, you and I would be sitting over a cup of coffee having this chat. But I've
Yes.
enjoyed this chat just as much, even though I've not been able to be within 2 feet of you, or even
Yes.
in the same room.
Mm.
So I'm going to embrace whatever the future brings us, and I'm
Yeah.
going to do my best to make it work, whatever that is.
Whatever that is. Yeah. Because yes, because of course my concern is it's not just what is said in court, as you and I know, it's how it's said and the opportunity to assess it and look and observe, and for jurors in crime or the judge to hear the evidence testimony. So yes, I think it's good advice to keep an open mind and see where we go. Now, just one question you didn't answer: the women in criminal law. Why did you get involved in that, especially as a mother of 5 sons?
Well, that's especially why I think. Well, I think if you think back when I started at the bar, we weren't permitted to wear trousers. It was, I think, 1995 when women were allowed to wear trousers in court. So I spent 5 very cold years wearing skirts, sometimes in very cold weather. And actually, it took me a very long time to adjust to being able to wear trousers. But I think it is still a profession where the entry is 50-50. So at
Yeah.
university level, there's 50% women and 50% men. But by the time women get to their mid-30s, the attrition rate is tragic.
Mm.
It's really, really sad. And I want to see what I can do to help with that. It's no use someone like me sitting back and saying, "Well, I've got here, so you can do it," and it's all easy. That's not why I'm doing it at all. I'm glad if it just inspires someone, or at least makes them think, "Look, this will get better." Because I do say to people, "This will pass. Just have courage. This really difficult period when your children are very small and they don't sleep very much, or
Yeah.
that difficult time where everything at sort of your knee height has to be moved in case there's a major accident, or
Yes.
where in my case with 5 boys, I used to seem to have a permanent seat at the accident and emergency bay in the summer because somebody had hit somebody over the head with a bat of some description or other, and you just think this will never end, but it does. And
Mm.
I want to see what we can practically do to support each other, but also to see what we can do to inform others, um, how they could assist women to remain in the profession, perhaps by giving time markings, or by not asking them to do too much overnight, by ensuring that they finish at a reasonable time so that people can get home and pick their children up from whatever childcare arrangements they've had. And
Yes.
just every now and again to say something nice to
Mm.
someone who looks tired and exhausted, because it does pass. That difficult period when your children are young and you're trying to practice and wash vomit off your shirt at the same,
Oh
that
yes.
that passes, and it does get easier. But we lose so many amazing women advocates, because it is so difficult. And I think in the past we've probably not done enough to support each other, by having mentorships and having organisations like Women in Criminal Law
Mm.
that, um, while I can do something, I will do something. I am so lucky to be where I am now. And I am determined to use it to help whoever I can along the way. And if I help someone, that's a great day for me.
Many thanks to Mary Pryor QC for taking part in Talking Law. What a delight to talk to her and get some inspiring words of wisdom. Thank you again for listening to Talking Law with me, Sally Penni. You can find me on Twitter @SallyPenni1. Please do leave us a review. We'd love to get your feedback. Until the next episode, do check out the latest Women in the Law UK book. It's a look at how far the profession has come in the last 100 years, featuring career and well-being advice. It's available now on Amazon. Just search for Talking Law with Sally Penni. And don't forget to visit us at womeninthelawuk.com for all the latest news about our organisation. Thank you again for listening. Talking Law was produced by Sam Walker and is a What Goes On media production.